take it away.
All right, so we're going live now. We are, I will tell you if we're live now or not. We are now live. Yes. Okay, perfect. Wonderful. All right. Hello, everyone. Oh, yes. Hello, everyone. Hi. Okay, so I want to thank everybody here for joining us. And there's Mr. Binney. Wonderful. Perfect.
Hey, finally.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Binney. Yep. I put a little disclaimer in the post saying you'll be late, but this is perfect. You're actually right on time.
Everything's okay? You can hear me now?
Yeah, we can't see you though.
Oh, wait a minute.
No problem. Okay, yes. And we are live.
Okay.
Mr. Binney. Beautiful. Wonderful.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we're good to go. We've got questions rolling in already. So Mr. Binney, let me just first introduce the stream here. I'll be brief. My name is Jose Vega. I am going to be moderating this AMA here, and I am joined by the wonderful Kirk Wiebe. So, you know, hi, say hi to everybody. And I am also joined here by Mr. Binney, of course, as well. So hello there, Mr. Binney. And then with me today, who will be co-moderating with me is Leah DeGrucci, who I can't, there she is. Leah DeGrucci, who will be co-moderating with me. She will be reading aloud some of these questions. I myself will be transcribing a lot of the questions as well as with Mr. Kenneth DeGrucci here. Kenneth will also be transcribing and helping out with us. So with that being said, I think we can just go right into it with the first question, which I will read out loud, which comes from this user named No Menace. And he asked, why are they releasing the Hunter stuff so slowly and so close to the election? Wouldn't it have been better to do this before people started voting?
Answer is that yes, and the reason is they don't want to cause such an uproar. I guess I don't know. I don't understand why they simply don't see evidence of a crime and release it, because under Executive Order 13526 Section 1.7, they're required to declassify. If I were the DNI and I saw evidence of a crime, I would immediately declassify and turn it over for release. These people are not doing it. That means they're a part of the cabal down there, the swamp, trying to hide stuff, protecting one another from doing stuff, you know, from getting caught and going and paying an account. You know, they don't want to go. See, the problem is if you assume a position in government and you find all the crimes that all your predecessors have committed and you submit them for prosecution to the Department of Justice, then you're liable too when you get out of office too. So they're trying to protect one another from generations of politicians not holding each other accountable. That's what's going on.
Okay, perfect. Let me just ask, Kenneth, do you got that?
Could you just repeat the last thought you had there?
Well, it's just the idea that the politicians are not prosecuting those who have gone before them and committed crimes because they don't want to be held accountable for the crimes they've committed.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know how else to put it. You know?
Yes, Mr. Wiebe, of course. Oh, let me just make it clear too, because Kenneth and I will be transcribing. So if we ask you to repeat something, I hope you don't mind. It's just so that we make sure we get your answer down clear. Yep. Perfect. Yes, Mr. Wiebe.
Yeah, well, in that question asked by No is also this issue. We have a person by the name of William Barr, who is the Attorney General of the United States. He was selected by Trump to run the DOJ. Now, the question is, why isn't the Attorney General acting on the information that Rudy Giuliani and others have had for months? The FBI got that laptop in December of 2019. Clearly, there was time in the intervening months to take a step towards a major investigation that has been avoided. Now, this either means that Attorney Barr is part of the crooked crowd and is trying to protect them, or he's being blackmailed because someone knows something that could be unpleasant for him. And so he's being silent, disabled. But what the viewer is really asking is, why is nobody doing anything? And that is a valid question. And we should not tolerate the status quo. So I would urge anyone listening to pick up the phone and call the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Civil Rights Division. Why? Because you have a legitimate claim against the DOJ that your civil rights under the Constitution are being subverted by the DOJ not addressing blatant corruption, including censorship by social platforms, denying you the ability to access the truth.
Wow. Thank you. Kenneth, did you get that? Thumbs up means he's got it. Great. Perfect.
I would only add that he should address it to the Department of Just Us, not Justice.
Okay. Got it. Perfect. Okay. Wonderful. Leah, do we have the next question? And I'll type the next one up.
All right. Okay. The next question comes from well_qualified. Do you expect anything big to come from the Google, Facebook, and Twitter hearings? Or is it just more theater?
I don't expect much. They should be broken up. That's all. I mean, it's pretty clear that they've been acting as editors and censoring what the population is allowed to hear. So they've been controlling the narrative, and they should be removed from that paragraph 230 section where they are protected from protected under the law from being sued. They should be sued for the things that they're doing, and they should be held accountable in court. After all, their filtering process is not unknown to me or anybody else in the public. What are the criteria for them to do that? They don't tell you that, right? They just do it, and they say you violated our criteria. Well, they don't make that clear, and they also just unilaterally do it. And it's obviously they're doing it against conservatives as opposed to liberals. And so, I mean, they're editors, so they should not be considered and given protection under any law. And they should be broken up too, by the way.
Okay, Mr. Wiebe, do you
Yes.
have any response? Yes.
Well, I would add that the simple answer to the question is yes, you can expect things to change, but not if you vote the wrong way in this election. What I'm trying to say is, if you want none of the corruption, none of the censorship to be addressed, vote for Biden-Harris. If you want it addressed, vote for Trump. Whether you like Trump or not, we're talking about issues and policies that affect your personal rights to access information under the Constitution. And it's that simple. It really does. In terms of the near term, what you can do, vote for the president. It's that important.
Okay, perfect. Give me 1 second here, and I will just, okay, sorry, there we go. All right, now we have here a long list of questions from one user, so we're gonna take this in parts. Good thing they ask it in different things, bullet points here. So first they say to Binney and Wiebe, this is from, hi, I am from the internet. Binney and Wiebe, I just wanted to first say thank you both for your service to this great country. And I would argue more importantly, dedication to transparency, truth, and public accountability. Without heroes like you, America would fucking suck. I have a bunch of questions, so I'm just going to put them all here. Feel free to answer as many or as few as you'd like. Thank you for your time and consideration. So we'll take this one bit at a time here. And I'm going to post this one directly into the Reddit, Leah and Madison. So I'll take this one up. Kenneth, you can just, I'm going to type out this first one, then you can type out the next one, which I'll put in the thing now, just so you know. I know I'm going off script here, but Kenneth, the one I just put in, that's for you. Anyways, so the first question we have here is, what is your opinion on the NSA versus the CIA? Is it a thing? Are they friends? Is it kayfabe or K-A-Y-F-A-B-E? Don't know what that means. Kayfabe. But that's the question. That's the first question.
You want to do that one now, or okay? Well, I think there's still a competitive relationship there. One tries to get the upper hand over the other, but they still are trying to cooperate underneath it. For example, now CIA has direct access to the NSA databases under the IC Reach program, using queries to go directly into it with no oversight whatsoever, by the way. So they are cooperating at a fairly basic level. I'm sure that their interpretations of the data that they have and are looking at are differ based on their backgrounds, and this has traditionally been the case. So there may be some slight differences, there may be major differences, in which case the either agency wants to be the right one, on top, and so they have a leg up on the other. That's always been the case. They've always done that, and I believe that that's universally true between competing intelligence community agencies. They always try to get the scoop on the other, so they shine as the beacon of truth. But they also, under the recent stuff, have been cooperating in this axis of evil, trying to pull a coup on the United States president and trying to subvert the entire constitutional process of the United States. In many ways, this is only the tip of the iceberg. There's many other things they're doing that we don't know yet, and some of which I suspect, and some of which are coming out and will be coming out in the future, I hope. So I think that, yeah, there's still a competitive feeling there.
Okay. All right. Mr. Wiebe.
Yeah, I would just add that both of those agencies, NSA and CIA, have operated illegally underneath the United States Constitution for the better part of their existence. They've always been an arm of the executive branch and a favorite of many presidents down through the years. Harry Truman, back in the late 40s, wanted to get rid of the CIA. It was becoming a problem, getting too independent for its own good, and putting the United States in an embarrassing position with regard to activities targeting various people, entities, organizations outside the United States. And so it's a bit of a rogue, has been a rogue, and hard to control. I, for one, believe it's time to get rid of it and replace it with something else. Something more accountable, more controllable. It's out of control right now. But so is NSA. NSA was not that evil, plotting, dark beast that the CIA was, at least not initially. It was designed to coordinate intel across the four major services, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and bring sanity and a bigger intelligence picture by correlating the various parts of information they have. And so for a while it was okay, but even NSA was subverted, which led to the formation of the oversight committees in Congress, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. That was created, those committees were created in 1975 under the Church Committee, named after Senator Church, who was spied on by the NSA, by the way, as was Martin Luther King and a number of war protesters and the like during the Vietnam War. So even NSA has gone astray. The answer was to create these two committees and provide oversight so this would never happen again. What was not to happen again? The NSA spying on Americans. Well, guess what you have now after 9/11? The NSA spying on Americans on steroids. On steroids. And so, again, the whole intelligence community has grown out of and crossed this red boundary in violation of the Constitution and any human ability to control them. They are the biggest threat together. They are the biggest threat to this nation's freedom, is the intelligence community itself and those who control it.
Perfect. Leah, could you read the next question that I had posted, or that I put in the Discord? It's the Operation Paperclip one.
Yes. All right, here's the next question. What is your opinion on the effects of Operation Paperclip? Is the US actually run by super sneaky Nazis who managed to usurp key positions in powerful organizations like NSA, CIA, FBI, etc.?
It certainly looks that way. I mean, if you looked at what Clapper, Brennan, and Rogers at the NSA, I think Rogers is turning. He's probably in there trying to straighten out the record so he can save his particular backside. So I think it's a matter of all of them. They collaborated, they coordinated, they attempted to basically have a bloodless coup against the president of the United States. That needs to be held. They need to be held accountable for that. That's treason. That's sedition. That's all kinds of crimes that I can think of. Maybe I'm not a lawyer and aren't applying the terms, but it sure sounds right. It sounds like that to me. And so I would refer them to anybody who had integrity in the Department of Just Us, and see what they think and what their opinion is, and make it public. If they make their opinions like you did under Bush and Cheney to get the spying going, he manipulated words and the law to make it look like it was legal. And when he did that, that just told you the character of all these lawyers who are close to power. They want to appease power and not actually do the right thing. So I just can't see it giving it to a lawyer that without being publicly known what this lawyers are saying. You can't let them deal in secret. In secret, to close a secret door, they'll do anything they want, and you can't. That's what the danger is here.
Okay, Kenneth, did you get that? Okay, Mr.
Right.
Wiebe, of course.
Yeah, let me just add that it's not the organizations themselves that are doing things in a corrupt, unconstitutional way. It's the people in them. Now, I draw this distinction because one could say, well, the United States government its organizational chart is out of whack. And that may be true to some degree, and you can debate that till the cows come home. But one thing I do know for sure is that the people inside them are largely corrupt. The only way these abuses happen is by people being on the inside running them who do not have your constitutional rights first and foremost in their minds when they hit the door every morning and leave at night. I don't know how they sleep at night. I really don't. But for this government to have almost suffered a coup, a silent coup, using the intelligence agencies, people don't realize how close we came to being taken over by people in the intelligence communities. It came this close. Thank God it was discovered. Russiagate, all of this was an attempted coup, not just a friendly disagreement. This was an attack on the United States government, not Trump, but our way of governance. You have to keep that in mind. We can never let this happen again. And the only way you can prevent it is to get the right people in the Department of Justice who are totally sworn to uphold the law, not in 10 years, but right now. Action it right now. You have every expectation that the FBI and the DOJ performs in your personal interest and the Constitution right now. No excuse for delays, none, none whatsoever. Be very intolerant, be very adamant about expressing and demanding your rights. It's important you do that.
Great. Thank you. We'll come back to this long list of questions in just a second. And for my techies here, when Kenneth puts in his answer, make sure you put it in where the long list is as a separate reply. So you just hit reply again and then pop it right back in there. Okay, so now let's go over here to the next question. This comes from Khabib Nurmagomurmur. A lot of these names, anyways. They say, we've been hearing rumblings of a great reset in terms of surveillance and privacy. Do you know any details on what changes the powers that be are trying to usher in? Just asking because I want to be able to know what to look for so I can push back. Thank you.
I personally don't have any knowledge of that or any idea what they're planning.
If you are asking, are we aware of any intent to set all this correct, make it right? In general, it's a broad target and a broad goal of the Trump administration to do that. That I can vouch for. And Bill and I are trying to help that in any way we can. We're willing to advise people, make suggestions, whatever. We might even go back into government service for a short period of time if they give us the authority to hire a regiment of samurais, as Bill says, and clean house.
3 regiments.
So
it's a deep swamp. There takes 3 regiments.
So I'm hopeful there's a plan. I don't know any specifics. I'm not aware of what it is all I'm saying.
Okay, perfect. By the way, Bill, you referenced an executive order number before. I didn't get that number.
13526.
Okay, I'm going to edit this right now. 13526. Got it.
Section 1.7.
Section 1.7. Okay.
It's the executive order governing classification for the whole U.S. government.
Boom. Beautiful.
And that requires them to they don't give an option there. They're required to declassify evidence of a crime. That's required.
Unfortunately, it's ignored by everyone.
Yep. Except for Ty Clevenger now, he's bringing in a case that he's taking against the U.S. government. He's starting to point out this executive order. I've been pushing people to do it, lawyers and so on. Now Ty Clevenger is doing it. That's great. They ought to be held to their own laws, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Leah, do we have the next question ready? You are muted.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yes. Here is a question from Energy Astrum. Has there been a single case of whistleblowing in high-ranking circles that resulted in significant changes? For example, the Edward Snowden case has not produced much. The scale of mass surveillance is as high as ever and doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. No one went to jail. All of the high-ranking CIA officials that lied on record faced no consequences. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, that's why I referred to Barr and Durham and all the people in the Department of the DOJ. I refer to them as the Department of Just Us. And we are not included. We, the people of the United States, are not included because we have a double system of laws. Those are that applies to all us peons down here. And then the laws that apply to those in positions of power in the government, they're never held accountable for anything, right? The rest of us are, and that's why I refer to it as the Department of Just Us. And until they get accountability up the top level, why, nothing's going to change. I mean, it's only going to keep getting worse. Like, I blame most of this on Gerald Ford, President Ford, when he pardoned President Nixon, because Nixon was about to face trial for violating numerous laws in the Watergate affair, cover up and obstruction of justice, things of that nature. And when Ford said, to save the country, I have to pardon him. The country can't handle going through that turmoil of a trial of a president. What he really was saying was, every president has the get out of jail free card, and that's the next president who will pardon him if he's ever tried to be held accountable for any of the crimes he's committed. That's really what's going on here. Here's how you cover up your crimes when you're in positions of power. You cover it up by not prosecuting. Like Comey went out and listed all kinds of crimes that Hillary Clinton had committed, and he said, but it's not enough to try. Give me a break. A fraction of that is what they tried whistleblowers on. I mean, he just was out there admitting we are all a part. Hillary is a part of the Department of Just Us, and we are not included, and we're not trying her. That's the arrogance of these people. They figure they have the control of all the power, and they should be held accountable and go to jail for it. That's my opinion.
Mr. Wiebe?
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly right. And I want people to notice this. I just talked about the church committee that established the two intelligence oversight committees that currently sit in Congress, one in the House, one in the Senate. They have failed. Recent history instructs us that those two committees are worthless. Did they prevent any of the transgressions that NSA has committed? Did they prevent the Russiagate fiasco? No. Did they prevent the misuse of a FISA warrant to spy on an American? No. They have failed in every instance. So what we need to do is find a better way. And I would tell you, Bill and I have discussed what's really needed to do it right. Again, I'll repeat, you need honest people, people who are not corrupt in Congress, in the government, doing the right things for the people they represent. Us, the American people, we the people, not them the people, we the people. And then you need a mechanism that can truly spy on NSA to see what they're doing and if they're following the law. And when I say spy, I mean perform the kind of oversight that is necessary to ensure it isn't breaking the law. You need a small team of technicians, could be one of you, any of you, for example, sitting in a room with, say, 5 or 6 others, with computer access into every NSA network and database, so that you can see the kind of data analysts are accessing and whether it violates any law. So Congress would have a team of experts, or maybe the judiciary should have it. This should be a debate and a conversation. But someone who does real accountability checking on what is going on in the NSA. You could argue that for the CIA as well, because the two intelligence committees have failed the American people.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to move on here to the next question. Leah, I will post this one.
Can I add one thing to that, Jose?
Please, of course.
I would only add that, the committees are not oversight. They are encourage and overlook.
That's right. That's the reality.
In other words, they encourage the intelligence community to do just about anything they can. And then they overlook all the crimes they're committing.
Great. Okay. Here's the next question. This comes from Eros 00. And they ask, what's the difference between the data collection of big tech companies such as Facebook or Google and government data collection? Does the government use the same database that big tech does? Do they overlap or are
Okay, here's basically the difference. Google collects what Google has access to. Facebook has access to its data and they collect that. Some of them sell data back and forth, but they are limited to their access capabilities. NSA collects it all from everybody, every company, not just in the United States, but in the world. So the overall set of data is NSA, the subsets are the different companies. But the databases, they have separate databases, and so does NSA. So it's not a common database, but they have the same material. NSA has it all. These companies have a certain amount, a subset of what NSA has.
Mr. Wiebe?
No, I agree 100%. I can't add anything to that. It's really, you have to look at it as one entity with parsed databases. And that's the vision that each part has. You know, Facebook, Google are not in the business of solving terrorism in some Middle Eastern country or even showing an interest, but certainly NSA does. So they have different interests, but all the databases and data flows can move amongst them.
See, another way to look at it is this way. The companies use the fiber optic lines to collect the data that they have. NSA uses the fiber optic lines to collect everything on the fiber optic lines. So in other words, however many numbers of countries or companies are communicating on those fiber lines, NSA is collecting it all. The systems they're using, the narrow insight devices, collect everything on the line.
Okay, I got that. Ms. Leah, do we have the next question?
Yes, we have a question here from Uncle Snake 3301. Mr. Binney,
Yeah.
can we once and for all say that Russia had nothing to do with hacking Podesta/DNC and that Seth Rich was WikiLeaks' ultimate source?
We can certainly say they had nothing to do with the leak, which was a leak, not a hack. And certainly we have forensic evidence to prove that it was not a hack. And here's the other part of this. This swamp goes into the courts. The courts would not allow my testimony in to bring the forensic evidence to prove that it was a local download and not a hack. They wouldn't allow that testimony in the courts for either the Roger Stone case or the General Flynn case. That's because they didn't want to hear the truth in the court. They couldn't handle it being in the public domain and documented in a court of law. And that's what happened in the last Reddit, that the first Reddit we tried to do, they shut that off because even the people running the Reddit there, at that, whatever section that was of Reddit, they didn't want that truth heard. So, it's the conspiracy of the swamp goes much deeper than anybody knows, and it includes the courts. They're not exempt. And we have to be suspicious of even the Supreme Court now, because they refuse to hear our petition to deal with the illegal, unconstitutional collection of NSA of collecting all the data on every US citizen. So, and also managing the targeting system for all kinds of targeting, not just the drones, but other kinds of targeting too. Anything they wanted to do, gang stalking, whatever kind of targeting they wanted to do, they could do using the NSA data. So the NSA that database is facilitating all this evil. That's the problem.
Okay, Kenneth, did you get that before Mr. Wiebe? Okay, great.
Okay.
Mr. Wiebe, did you have anything to add to that?
No, nothing to add to that.
Okay, great, perfect. Here is a question. Again, Leah, I'll post this one. This one comes from Gimme the Loot. With the major tech companies and the media silencing the Hunter Biden story, do you think it will ultimately do nothing?
I think if he means, does the Hunter Biden story not affect the outcome of the election?
Yes, I think he means like,
yeah.
Right.
It's well, I mean, that's what the big companies, the Facebook and so on are trying, and also the mainstream media are trying to do. They're trying to suppress this knowledge so that it's not in the narrative for people to discuss, and it's not being, Biden is not really addressing it properly. It's not really coming across as really genuinely addressing what that issue is. And they're not the mainstream media nor any of the others, Facebook or all of them, by hiding it, they're keeping it out of sight so he doesn't have to address it. So they are in fact trying to influence the outcome of the election by doing that. In other words, anything in the narrative should be out for open for all this discussion. If you recall, back in 2016, when Trump was coming up for the election, they had a lot of things to say about him, and nobody hid any of that. So, and their narrative about Russiagate is still going back at Trump. That's still going on. They still believe that that happened, and that's because they said it so many times from so many media personalities and so many, people in Hollywood and so on, people who didn't have any firsthand knowledge of anything. They just said somebody else said it, so I'll say it too. It's like Adolf Hitler said, if you're going to tell a lie, tell it often, and tell a big lie and tell it often until it's believed. You could look it up on the web. That's a direct quote from Adolf Hitler.
Mr. Wiebe?
What Bill just described for the audience is proof and evidence of why, if you are interested in truth, and that's the storyline of this get together here on Reddit, truth. If truth is important, why would you vote for the side that is covering it up? You wouldn't. That is your defining criteria for how to vote. It's that simple. I do not work for the Trump campaign, but I fundamentally, in the core of my mind and my being and my morality and integrity, know that if you cannot tell the truth, if you impede the truth, I don't want any part of you representing me in a government. It really is that simple.
Okay, thank you. Leah, do we have the next question?
We have a question here from Dylan. Is there anything short of a constitutional convention which can possibly hope to empower the people of the USA to fix all that is broken and corrupt in the American Republic? I'm very much of the opinion that the government of the USA has been effectively subverted and no longer even pretends to serve the people of the USA. Mr. Wiebe?
Yeah, it's a wonderful observation. I agree with it. And the answer is not quite clear. We are at a crossroads. You hear this expression, the country is at a crossroads. One of the founders, might have been Jefferson, said, every now and again, the tree of liberty has to be fed by the blood of tyrants and patriots. What does that mean? It means that the founders of this nation knew that it would be difficult to stay and maintain our freedoms under the Constitution. That you would have to, at some point, maybe even sacrifice blood to enable it to continue. And that's why the seriousness of this entire discussion of truth, of freedom, freedom of the press, is so important. Imagine if the liberals win. Imagine they pack the courts. Imagine they stack the deck so everything goes their way. And the minority is not protected. We will become a nation of mob rule. The principle of the Electoral College, which guards the minority, the people in the countryside, against the wants and the desires of people in places like Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, where the big populations reside. The founders knew the only way you protect the minority is to create a legal construct that guarantees them the right to be heard. We're at that point where, again, we can admit that the government is so bad you can't fix it. All right, where does that lead us? Revolution. That's what the founders said. Bill.
Yeah, I want to add something there. I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said we probably going to need to have a revolution every 200 years. That was adding to what Kirk was saying. But the other point is, there is in, I believe it's Article 5 of our Constitution, we have the right to have a constitutional convention by all the states. The states can call a constitutional convention independent of Washington. And if you have 75% of the states, that means 38 states, in agreement, then they can hold that constitution because they'll have a quorum, and and they can modify the Constitution to decide how we elect people who go to Washington in any either the House, Senate, or even the White House, any place. So, and we can do that independent of anybody currently in Washington. And once we modify that Constitution, then we can have the authority then under the Constitution to implement it. One of the suggestions I keep making is part of the problem of our government is we have what I call permanently in place petrified politicians. That is, that they, once they get elected, they make an entire lifetime out of it. They're down there forever. Like I think Byrd from West Virginia was down there till he died at 93. I think that was his age. But at any rate, he was in Congress for, God, 40, 50 years. I don't know how long it was. But I mean, these people have their own entrenched thoughts and ideas, and you never get anything fresh or new in there, and they're stuck in the mud, basically. That's what I refer to it. So the idea is the Article 5 would allow us to redevelop or redetermine how the population is fed into the Washington positions in the Washington government. My suggestion was we treat it something like we do jury duty in trials. They make it a true public service position, in which case we can randomly select from the voter rolls or from whatever roles we want to define as usable for a position, and just randomly select that every periodically. And also that would ensure that we would never have in place petrified politicians. You know, we get rid of the criminal group, basically, because once you get into those positions and you assume that power, people get distorted mentally. I guess their egos take a trip or something. I don't know what it is, but in those positions, they tend not to do anything. And that's one of the things, that's one of the things that President Trump said when he was debating Biden. He said, I ran for president because of you and the people like you, basically, who said a lot of things, but never did anything. That's the whole point here, right? But my point is that those people get in place permanently almost. And that means you never solve anything. So my idea is very simply, let's go back, restructure how we vote people into office in Washington, implement it, and make sure that we have fresh ideas coming in all the time. And imagine what that would do. If we randomly selected from the voter rolls, for example, then, you know, and we could have other criteria on it too, by the way. I'm not saying that's the limit, but you could then, once you select people, they're never coming back. So, you know, there's no political party here. No political parties at all. You get rid of political bargaining, political bickering. You get a bunch of people then who would be trying to solve problems and working together to do that. And you get a bunch of people in Washington who never want to go to a war because they see the consequences of it. You know, all our kids coming back maimed, distorted, you know, just and send them off to kill people and be killed. That's, give me a break. We got to stop that. I think that's one of the main reasons we need to do this, you know, is to change how we do things, because the people who we have in positions now are so corrupt, and they then tend to just say, you know, we have the power, or we should decide what the world does. And I'm here to say we should not, because the other societies are not our culture. They're not our societies. We don't have the right to determine what they do. We should stay out of that. So I just think that by doing something like that, randomly picking them, getting rid of term limits or no term limits, you're randomly selected or you're not, You're in or you're out, and nobody knows who would the lobbyists lobby. They wouldn't know who to lobby, right? So all of that. But you'd also have to change the structure of the staff that you have that exists to support all these positions. You can't keep them in. If you do, you keep the same legacy approach going. So you have to have a cleansing of the House, so to speak, and the Senate.
Okay. By the way, just so we're clear, our video engineer, Kynan, he is taking clips and answers of what's going on. We're recording the whole thing, of course, but we're also getting small clips here to amend to the responses. Sometimes we miss little bits here and there, and we also miss the personality. You just don't get the personality when you write. So we are also going to be amending the video responses as well. All right, so here I have the next question, Leah, which I will type up and I will put into the Reddit myself. This one comes from one of the moderators. He's been very friendly to us. He's not the one who submitted a comment. He's another one. His name is assuredly a throwaway. His question is, welcome back, Mr. Binney, and thank you for joining us, Mr. Wiebe. What are your thoughts on digital public forums? Should they be considered common carriers / public forums and subject to some kind of speech neutrality?
Yes. That's pretty simple. I agree with all that.
Okay. Yes. All right. Good. Yeah. Because he's obviously we're doing this on Reddit, but this is a subreddit called the R Conspiracy. And before I go on, Mr. Wiebe, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would want to know what the questioner means by neutrality. What does that mean?
Okay. What does that mean? Okay, great. So then we'll go back to that when they reply. That one was kind of short, so I'll take up the next typing. Oh, Kenneth, did you get the last thing, by the way, the last question? I know that was a double thumbs up. Means it's good. Perfect. Okay, here. So let's go here to the next question, which I'm going to give Kenneth a break here because it's kind of unfair for me to just pass it on to him, even though he just typed all that. So let me check here. And
I have a question if you need.
Okay, go ahead. And you know what? I'll type it out.
Okay.
This one, Kenneth. Yeah.
Okay, so this one is coming from Alarius of Brel. Hello, Mr. Binney and Mr. Wiebe. Thank you for taking the time to answer questions. I saw that in this AMA, you have advocated for certain social media companies to be removed from Section 230. Could you please clarify how removal of a company from the protections of Section 230 will reduce censorship? Wouldn't the removal of liability shields actually increase censorship by these companies so as to avoid liability?
No, you see, the problem with that Section 230 is it gives Facebook and other Silicon Valley companies that are in the public media, so to speak, the protection from being sued in a court. In other words, anything they do basically is no longer, you can't take them to court and sue them for what they've been doing. In other words, when they censor something without any fundamental basis, like if they state the criteria, you can't advocate for violence, you can't show pornographic pictures, or you can't do pedophilia or any criminal act can't be advocated on the web, and they can censor that. That's fine. But when they start censoring you for political statements, as the first Reddit did, actually they weren't. It wasn't a political statement. It was just we were stating factual evidence that was been submitted to a court of law, and that we could prove forensically, and that was censored. Why? Because it didn't support the narrative of the Russian hack of the DNC. So by doing that, by censoring that way, they could now be liable in a court lawsuit if they remove Section 230. When they don't remove Section 230, they can do that, and they're not liable. You see. So in other words, the public can hold them accountable for the actions they take. Right now, they can't.
Mr. Wiebe, did you want to add to that?
No, I agree with everything Bill said.
Okay, perfect. I'm just finishing up typing that up here. So Leah, why don't you read the next question and let Kenneth take it.
All right, so here's a question from Shook Queen. Kirk and Bill, it's been mentioned that there is a heavy drug culture there that laid off hundreds of workers this year at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in LA. Do you think that this hotel is involved with much more than what is being told in the media? Does this all tie into Hunter Biden and the leaked pictures of him that take place in Chateau Marmont that features naked women and cocaine?
I'm afraid that's, I'm not aware of that case, so I don't know how I could comment on that, you know?
Mr. Wiebe?
Yeah, I can only say this. I am like
Never
Bill.
stayed there either, by the way.
Yeah, I don't have intimate knowledge of this particular incident, but I do have an observation about drugs in the United States. There was a time, a brief period of time, when the United States government waged a true war against drugs. And then it was given up. We even saw it at NSA. We had a drug czar at NSA, a position that was supposed to look at NSA technical abilities that were supporting the war against drugs. That position went away. So someone in the US government made the conscious decision not to go after drug trafficking and just to let it happen. We've even heard stories about Mena, Arkansas, in which the government allowed drugs to be brought into the country and distributed to the streets of Los Angeles and other places to undermine the price of drugs and to keep the people happy. Now, isn't that interesting? You drug your own people. The government drugging its own people to keep problems from showing up. Now, that money from those deals went off to fund Iran-Contra and you know, all kinds of things that the government probably shouldn't have been doing. But the point of it is, we don't seriously fight the drug cartels. They're right across the border in Mexico, and there's some in the Middle East, but the preponderance is off the southern border, and we pretty much look the other way. So it would not surprise me that there were such problems that the person asking the question has posed. Wouldn't surprise me at all that that scenario could actually have happened. And I only chalk it up to a very loose policy that we have on the supply of drugs to this country.
I can add something to that if I could. Yeah, it's the only beef I have that I know of, at least against the Ronald Reagan administration, and that gets back to the Iran-Contra deal. And what they were doing was they were selling. First of all, the administration asked Congress to supply money so they could buy weapons to support the Contra in Honduras, I think it was, to buy them guns and weapons, and then they were going to go into and fight the Nicaraguan government at the time. And the Congress refused to give the administration the money to do that. So they had the CIA, George H.W. Bush ran the CIA for a while, and I assume he was the one who arranged it. But they had the CIA smuggle drugs from South America into the United States, telling the immigration people and all the border control people to don't pay attention to this plane coming into the country. It's one of ours. And so it would be a CIA plane coming in with tons of drugs, and they would take it, give it to the people that the dope dealers in Los Angeles, sell it on the street, take the money, go buy guns, and then give the guns to the Contra. So, and those programs, you can look it up on the web. The program's called Watchtower, Amadeus, and Pegasus. Those are the three programs that I knew of that CIA was running. So if you Google CIA space Watchtower or CIA space Pegasus or Amadeus, you'll get to read about all these dope smuggling programs. And so the question I always have, you know, can you ask the FBI or the CIA, are they the ones supplying the dope? I don't know. You know, that would be something to ask them.
Okay, perfect. We are now going to go to, by the way, we are almost an hour in and we've got 60 comments in. So that's good. It's great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Anyways, here, let's see. So here's a big one here. This one comes in from, their name is Polly_Burr, Polly_Per. They say, Mr. Binney and Mr. Wiebe, I have been very suspicious of the release of the Hunter Biden laptops, documents, images, videos, due to the proximity to the presidential election, as well as the players involved in their release and dissemination. Then they list people like the New York Post, Giuliani, Steve Bannon's News Org, all of whom are either associates of the president, partisans for the GOP. The conflict of interest, RE, releasing material potentially damaging the President Trump's competition are obvious and major red flags. Why do you think this material was not released via an unaligned third-party outlet such as WikiLeaks in order to erase the image of political gameplay?
If I'm not mistaken, Rudy Giuliani tried to release that to other media. I believe that's the case. I don't believe he went to WikiLeaks because the government of the United States doesn't really, they want to have a criminal case against WikiLeaks, okay? So you don't go and give them data or information which would look like you're collaborating with them to get leaking information out, as opposed to giving it to a mainstream media like the New York Times, who won't publish a lot of stuff because it doesn't fit their narrative, or any of the other mainstream medias who won't put it on the air. So, I mean, the whole idea is, my understanding is he tried to get it out through other means, but he couldn't do that. So I think he went various other places. I thought he gave it to Fox News and earlier, and they actually were able to verify and validate some of it. I don't know how much they've been able to do of that, but they've certainly validated some of it.
Mr. Wiebe?
Yeah, I can only say that while your thesis that the timing is political and that the sources reporting on it are purely political, I would not be so sure. The laptop was made available to the FBI in December of 2019. The FBI and the DOJ have failed to act on the information. Part of the reason could well be the corruption that Bill and I have been describing for you throughout this entire session and many other sessions. We don't have people we have favorites playing favorites. We don't have unbiased people in these very important positions serving us, the people, so that you don't even have to be suspicious. The fact that you're asking the question the way it is tells me that you're aware that dirty tricks are played by political enemies, and they are. But it's the DOJ's job and the FBI's job to set us all straight and hold the truth sacrosanct. And they're not. They're part of the problem. They're part of the problem with the FISA process. We know that. In other words, time and time again, we know that our own Justice Department is not just. It's just us, as Bill has said. Different laws, different strokes for different folks. And it's a crime that we've come to that. But I firmly believe in my heart and my soul that the data you're seeing come out about the Biden family is accurate and true and can be proven if someone will just take up the responsibility and do it.
Okay, thank you. Leah, could we please go to the next one?
Yes. So I have the next question from ES Dragon, I think. Thanks for answering our questions. What do you think of Alan Parrott and his claims that Obama/Biden know bin Laden was sheltered in Iran for 10 years?
I personally don't know, have any knowledge of one way or the other. I would find it pretty hard to believe that they would not know somewhere, at least in what country he was all along. Now, whether or not, because you can follow people associated with them, see where they travel and things like that, and just get some general idea just from that. But you maybe not know specifically where he is. So I really don't know either way. I have no knowledge of any information that could clarify that issue.
Mr. Wiebe?
I think Bill hit it on the head when he said, well, let's put it this way. You don't always take out a target, an enemy, when you can. It's specifically because you want to understand how the enemy operates. And so that you may have them in your crosshairs. You may know exactly where he is, but you want to gather associated information. Who is he working with? How are they working? Do they move at night? Do they move during the day? How are they communicating? What is their modus operandi? You want this knowledge base of information so you can have a smarter, more in-depth response to the operation when you have the opportunity and decide it's time.
Kenneth, you got that?
Oh, sorry.
No problem. All right.
Okay. I have a question here that was just came in that I'll take up. You on previous streams, you've said that you've encouraged people our age being, in our early 20s. You said people should make their own encryption systems.
Yeah.
Now, take me. I have a very limited understanding in encryption, first of all, but it sounds like a fun project that I should get into. So, where do I start? No, what does that mean, and where do I start?
Well, probably, the idea of having some kind of class or talk about encryption and the history of encryption. The Code Breakers, I think, was one of the first books to come out. That gives you some idea of the background. I mean, it goes back to Julius Caesar, okay? But and the Romans back when they used to send secret messages from one to the other, what they would do is they'd take a guy and shave the hair off his head, write the message on top of his head, and then let the hair grow back, and then send him off as a courier to where they wanted him to go. And then when he got there, they would shave off his hair and read the message. That was one way of doing it. Now, graduated from that, various other levels of encryption, codes and ciphers developed. Ciphers developed more recently. Mostly it was codes up to World War I believe would be the right way. I might be mistaken, maybe a little earlier than that. But for example, the British field armies main encryption code was a Playfair square. Now, what a Playfair square is, it's like a 5 by 5, and then you inscribe all the letters in the alphabet there in a certain arrangement, whatever you want, and you put I and J together because they're similar. So, but when it comes to encrypting, you take one character, you take them 2 characters at a time. One goes to one point, one to the other in the square, and then the rule is you never cross top or bottom. So the first character gets encrypted going diagonally under the second, and the second gets encrypted by going diagonally under the first. That's your encrypted version, okay? And so when you reverse that, you simply go to the 2 encrypted and go do the reverse process. But the rule is you never cross top and bottom. And that's a simple encryption. That was the British Field Army's main encryption system in World War I. Now, after that, of course, when the electronic age hit, we went into online encryptions and things like that. It evolved into the Enigma in World War II. The Japanese used codes in World War II instead of ciphers. The Germans used ciphers instead of codes mostly. So I mean, it varied over time, but the history of that, I think, is pretty well documented in that book, The Code Breakers. And I can't remember the author of that, but it was written back in 1980 or something like that, or maybe a little before that. It was about NSA too, and they give the history of it all. And there's some other books out there. If you Google code breaking, you should be able to get some of the books that were written about that.
Okay, great. Now I'm getting something here from a third party. Somebody just sent me an article from the Daily Caller, which comes from a press conference that Mr. Wiebe was just on with Roger Stone. Could Mr. Wiebe, could you just relay a bit of what Mr. Stone was saying on how Trump could still pull off a historic win?
Well, he didn't go into a lot of detail about that, but he did say there were indication of movement. And an important part of the movement of people is in the minority community who seem to be coming on strong for Trump as more is learned about the debate and the strict laws that put blacks in jail for minor drug usage and so forth are becoming known. It's creating quite a movement. He didn't go into a lot of specifics about that. But he did say that the censorship that's going on right now is something he had never seen in the history of the United States. And trying to make the point that if someone wants to censor information, it almost becomes a validation that the information is true, or it validates the fact that people don't want you to know about it to affect your thinking. And so imagine who are the proponents of censorship? Who are the guardians of censorship? You don't want to pick that side. So that's all I can comment on. I have no specifics other than general knowledge of certain polls that are showing people breaking late for Trump in the trends.
Okay, very good. I want to turn to actually the announcement post for this. So there was a announcement post that was done for this, for the AMA, and we had a few questions that came in from there. So these were people who submitted their questions who weren't going to be able to be here live. So I'm just pulling that up. In the meanwhile, while I pull that up, Leah, could you read the next question if you have one?
Yeah, I do have one.
Great.
So this question comes from Worm2120. Based on the NSA failsafe after Snowden's leaks years ago, how is any of this to be taken seriously or as truth? The system set in place was meant to make sure people like y'all don't exist anymore, aka whistleblowers in the NSA.
Well, let me give you some background on that. The program we developed before we left NSA and that they used and modified to spy on everybody because it would handle all the massive amounts of data without any difficulty, had built into it an auditing program that would audit anybody who came into the network and looked at what they looked at, how long they stayed, what data they interrogated, what data they pulled down, every action they took, we were monitoring with this using software to monitor what people were doing on our network. And that we wanted to do also to make sure that there were no violations of law and that people were basically taking actions to spy on something that was legitimate. In other words, they had human behavior that would say this is a justification of probable cause to look at this person. And in the meantime, unless they had that, we didn't take their data in, so everybody got privacy immediately. But when they looked at that, they said, gee, what that means is that, and this is almost a direct quote from the management of NSA to me, you mean to tell me that with this program, Congress can come in and look and see where we're spending and moving all the money and see everything we're doing? And I said, yes. And they said, you are never going to do this program. And so what that meant was they needed to hide what they were doing with the data and with the information and with money. And so everything what they did was to remove that process, get rid of it. That's why they didn't know what Edward Snowden took, because they had no monitoring program monitoring who did what on the network. In other words, it's deeply embedded in all the network log data. That's a massive amount of data, you know, and they don't have a program to go through it to pull it together to automatically evaluate it. So what that means is somebody would have to manually go through all this mountain of data to try to figure out what Snowden did. Well, you know, And so that was the whole idea from the beginning. They didn't want anybody to know what they were doing. So they hid it by getting rid of the program that could have discovered Edward Snowden. And I'm sure they have not implemented any such program to date. What they have, as far as my knowledge goes, my understanding is they implemented a program internally in the human interaction area where they said, see something, say something to the workers. If you see something by that another coworker or that your supervisor or somebody else that's working in the area is doing that you're suspicious of, you report it. That's their network now. It's not an automated network. So as far as anything, all the evidence of the crimes they are committing is already in the NSA database, and we do know how to get it out. And that's what they don't want, and that's what they want to hide. So they haven't fixed the problem, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Mr. Wiebe?
No, it's, I was thinking about what Bill just said about people, employees being asked to report suspicious activities by other employees. Can you imagine what that does to a workforce that spies on one another? Can you imagine the problems that would create? I mean, it just boggles the mind. It's like they turned the employees into what the Nazis called brown shirts. These were the young teenagers that ran around in brown uniforms, spying on their parents, their friends, and reporting things to Hitler. It's a diabolical kind of construct. I'd much rather hire very honest, high integrity people and let them do their job and trust in them than create spies out of all of them. But that's kind of the mentality they had.
Actually, if I could add, that's basically out of the Stasi program, the Stasi playbook. That's what they did, recruit most of the people, even family members, to report on their families. They did that too. So, but it's in this case, it's very similar and just a duplicate approach to what the Stasi did in East Germany under the communist state. And I would add that about this whole issue of spying, that Wolfgang Schmidt, a former East German Stasi lieutenant colonel, was quoted in I believe the Washington Post as saying, relative to the NSA spying program, for us, meaning the Stasi, this would have been a dream come true. So that tells you where we've gotten to.
Okay. Somebody just asked me a question here. They just PM'd this to me saying, Bill, you've expressed before that you don't read much, but you do like Poe. Would you do a live stream of yourself with your friends reading Poe out loud for Halloween?
Nevermore, nevermore. All right.
Well,
actually, he is buried in Baltimore, you know. There's a little church right next to the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore, downtown Baltimore, where Edgar Allan Poe is buried. So.
Then, Bill, we can do the stint in coordination with this group, Jose and his group. We'll go down to that cemetery. I'll bring a light. We'll light you up, and we can do this interview.
Wait a minute. I have to be here at my house handing out candy on Halloween.
Well, you know, it is when you talk about Poe, you take the purloined letter, right? And you have the detective who is completely baffled by how Poe solves the case, because there's a difference between what you see and what you, okay. Take the letter, for example, right? Where was the letter hidden? It was hidden in the most obvious place. And because it was so obvious, no one bothered to look there. It was hidden on the table, scattered around all the other pieces of paper. And no one bothered to look there, but it was so obvious. And that's kind of like the situation that we're on now. These things aren't hidden, they're hidden in plain sight. people just aren't seeing the obvious thing.
Well, it's just like the laptop, the Biden laptop. It's so obvious that people are trying to explain it away for other reasons. And so they don't look there. It can't be right. You see what I'm saying?
Ah, yes. That's right. By the way, Bill, Poe might be buried in Baltimore. That's true. But he used to live in the Bronx.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know that. Yeah. Yeah. He got around.
That's right.
Baltimore was its hometown, though.
Sure. You know, I would like to do a live stream of that of a reading sometime. Maybe not on Halloween night, but you know, maybe we could figure something out on that. That would be fun.
Yeah.
In any event, let's move on here. Oh, I want to ask, what is your times, by the way?
I'm okay.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. For how much longer are you?
Maybe we could go another half hour, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Perfect then. That sounds good to me. Okay, Leah, do we have the next question?
Hang on, I'm gonna have to grab one.
No problem. I see one here from Shook Queen again. She's saying it's her last question. She promises. You see that one?
Go ahead and ask it.
Okay, Kenneth, do you mind typing this one up for me? Okay. Or okay, double thumbs up. All right, great. This comes from Shook Queen again. She's asked questions before. She says, my last question, I promise, and it's completely NSA related, and I've been wondering about this for a long time. Can you talk more about Project Fairview and one of the NSA's largest surveillance programs in the 8 US cities, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, LA, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, D.C., that were on a top secret NSA map labeled as the US facilities that this project relies on? Also, thank you so much for answering my previous questions.
Actually, I put on my Twitter, tweeting. I was tweeting, so I started tweeting. By the way, I'm now in the social network. So, but I did publish the map of the Fairview, AT&T Fairview fiber optic taps, and it's not just those 8. Those are the 8 that are called peering sites. Those peering sites are where AT&T interfaces with other telecommunications companies around the world. Okay, so those are they call those peering sites. It doesn't talk about all the other sites they have across the country in all the major cities, basically, where they tap into the networks, and it's all documented on the Snowden slide that said, here is the Fairview tap points. And this was as of 2004, okay, 30 November 2004, I believe it was. And I put that in a tweet. And I also put the AT&T microwave line, the line of sight microwave line map from the 1960s on a tweet too. And I just said, one is the overlay of the other. And somebody took that 2 tweets and put them together and did an overlay, and it said spot on, you know, so. But the idea is that they only, that article they're looking at may have only talked about those 8 points, but there's over 80 other tap points that AT&T alone has. It doesn't count the ones for Verizon or 28 other telecommunications companies who are operating the NSA tapping under the program called Blarney. And that's also, if you Google NSA space Blarney, you can read about that, or you can read about it to Google NSA space Fairview for the AT&T, or NSA space Storm Brew for Verizon. All of that's there, and there's many more. There's over 100 tapping points that they're collecting all of this data, and in particular, AT&T is the largest one, and they're using things like the Neris Insight device at these different places, collecting data. I mean, they're collecting data in Nashville, Memphis, anywhere inside the major cities inside the United States, Chicago, everywhere. And they're talking about collecting voice over IP. This is back in 2004, as well as other data, right? But they don't define all of it. Then the peering groups, they list all of the, I think there's a separate list for all the data they're collecting there, which includes not just AT&T, but all the communications companies in the world. So The peering groups give them much greater reach, but and because of cooperations internationally, but the main ones inside the United States is where all the criminal actions are occurring, and that's where they're tapping and collecting all the metadata and content. If you tweet, if you send short messages, if you do things like surf the web, wherever you go, whatever you're doing, the British at least were a little open with what they were doing in cooperation with NSA, and that was to collect, and they called it internet connection records. So it meant they wanted to know everybody's connection on the internet. Anything they did, they needed to create an internet connection record for them to analyze. And that was fed into the NSA databases and stored for them, for as ever long as they can, so that they can retroactively analyze anything that anybody's done on any network in the world. And that's what's really going on. People may find that hard to believe, but it's not that difficult if you really understand the capacity and capabilities of the current systems. I mean, storage is cheap, communication systems are improving in terms of speed and power and so on. So it's not really that difficult to do this. I mean, even when I designed Thin Thread, the design was such that it was mathematically impossible to find a limit to the capabilities of that system. All right, it's that simple.
Mr. Wiebe, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would just add that the peering sites that Bill mentioned, the 8 points in the US, that's how you join the communications, the telecommunications across companies. And this happens all around the world, forming the global World Wide Web, the global internet, so that there's always a tap point that shares one company's data to another, especially where communications, phone calls are the topic, or email, or whatever else it might be.
Okay, you got that, Kenneth? 2 thumbs up. Perfect, wonderful. So I'm gonna take up some of the questions that came in from the announcement thread. These were people who couldn't join us live now, but sorry, I just heard something outside my house. These are people who couldn't join us live now, but they submitted questions so that we can take it up here, which is one. This comes from user Nogatone, which says, "This is great news," in reference to the AMA. "A question for both Bill and Kirk. We all know that the FBI seized the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop last December. The FBI has had the laptop for a year, and the contents of the hard drive have been known, including the Biden's involvement with human trafficking. If the NSA has universal access to all the data which is transferred across the US and other parts of the world, would they also be storing files related to Hunter Biden's dealings with Burisma and other crimes?" And before you answer, I just want to say that we will go till 6:45 because hopefully we can keep the thread open, let it populate with more questions, and possibly come back to it. So this way we don't have to, push it all the way. We can let it mellow out and let it build up more steam. So 6:45. But anyways, that's the question.
And I would say yes, absolutely. If there's anything NSA has copies of, it's communications between Americans and foreign entities, especially important foreign entities such as the Ukraine, China, and the elements that they were communicating with. So yes, NSA would have copies of all of that. And a simple FISA warrant should be issued to get those communications, and the FBI ought to certify the validity of what's on the laptop as a secondary step of certification. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would only say that, they've got that, and they've got everything else that everybody does on the fiber line. It doesn't matter, there's no dark web, and the dark web is connected with the fiber lines, and everything fiber is captured. So the dark web isn't really dark. It is communicates with light, and that light is captured and translated into data and stored by NSA. It's that simple and it's that straightforward.
Okay, great. I just want to make clear to people that Mr. Binney and Mr. Wiebe are both on Twitter. Their handles, I'll put in the Reddit. Mr. Binney is at Bill_Binney, and Mr. Wiebe, you are at Kirk Wiebe, right?
Yep.
Actually, at Kirk Wiebe, just
At-
like my name is showing up. Yep.
Okay, at Kirk Wiebe. Okay, perfect. So I will amend that to the Reddit thread and on the YouTube chat for those who'd like to follow our guest today. Ms. Leah, do we have the next question?
Yes, we have a question from FFS. Is this name taken too? Do you see what was said by Hillary Clinton sometime back advising Biden not to concede the election no matter what, as a threat to the American people that either Biden is declared the winner no matter what or else?
Well, I think that's what the implication is, but I don't see how my belief is that because of what the Democrats have been doing and what they've been, this false impeachment approach based on nothing, and what they've been trying to do to subvert our government and openly lying to the public and everything else. I mean, take Schiff in the committee. He's been saying there's evidence in secret that the Russians did the hack. And even when they exposed all of the testimony, it was very clear that he was lying about it. And so, what they've been doing is disgraceful. So my firm belief is that Trump's going to have a landslide win. And I don't think this is, she's probably just saying that to generate fear in the public so they vote for Biden, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the logic is that they say. To me, it's just, it would just in me create a counter move. I would be against anything they did after that.
Yeah, Mr. Wiebe?
I would just say it's a confirmation that the people on the left are out to destroy our form of government and the way we do business as a government. Elections have been going on for many years. We hope they're honest and that people aren't stuffing ballot boxes and copying signatures and cheating, but we now know that is going on. And so when a national figurehead like Hillary Clinton says, do not declare the other side victorious or go along with it, it is a direct attack on that system of government and the way of peacefully transferring or maintaining power in the United States. And so it should give everyone pause why someone would attack our system in that way. Why would you do that? What kind of reasons would be in your plotting mind to do things like that? Sow uncertainty, sow discord into the system.
Okay, perfect. Kenneth, you got that? Great. All right, so we're going to go back to somebody who we answered their question, but it required follow-up. This was the one where you asked Mr. Wiebe, you wanted to know what you meant by neutrality.
Yes.
So they said, thank you for the follow-up, Mr. Wiebe, and for your answers through the thread. Currently, per Section 230, a liability shield can only be activated by social media companies for conduct moderated, quote unquote, in good faith. I was somewhat thinking about what the standard should be for good faith moderation in terms of a company losing that liability shield, and wondering if some kind of speech neutrality would be an appropriate arbiter in that context. Although I am still struggling to define neutrality in my mind, so perhaps you've hit on an issue with my proposal. In any event, for your reference, the specific wording of 47 U.S. Code Section 230 is, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be held liable on account of any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access to or availability of material that the provider or users consider to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. So would you like to? Yeah, go for
Let
it.
us-
Let's look at the telephone company. It is a communication service at its core. So is Facebook, right? It's a type of communication. So is Instagram. So is Reddit. So are all these platforms. I do not censor telephone communications. The government does not censor telephone communications. Why do we want anyone censoring Facebook, Twitter? Why? Unless the stipulations and the conditions are very well defined and agreed to by the people. And so why Congress gave them complete absolution in this area boggles my mind. But I do think we have to put the premium on freedom of speech. And if you don't want to be a member of a Facebook page, don't do it. If you don't want to read stuff you don't agree with, don't subscribe. But the choice should be ours, not some fact checker hired by Facebook or Twitter.
Let us go back and use the example of the first Reddit we attempted to do. That Reddit was on for 18 minutes before they shut us down, censored us. And what were we talking about? We were talking about evidence submitted in a court of law in Roger Stone's case and in General Flynn's case in sworn affidavits, which meant that the people who submitted them, namely me, are liable for perjury in a court of law. Also, we were presenting forensic evidence of the proof that something was a leak and not a hack. And so what is the reason to censor that, basically? Well, they didn't want the truth about those issues out. That's the point. And we weren't talking about anything other than factual evidence and things that were submitted in a court of law. So what was the issue with that? They should be liable for doing that. That's my point. And that's the point of that Section 230 protected them. But when they remove it, they're no longer protected.
Okay, thank you. Leah, we're gonna go to you for one question, and then I have a question that will close us all out.
Right.
So, yes.
All right. So I've got a question from Ace Boy 77. He says, I saw recently that Ted Cruz interrogated Jack the Ripper Dorsey, and the hobo clearly lied. He then again makes a landing page on Twitter dedicated to the Dems. How are we going to make him and other tech oligarchs responsible for meddling and pushing a favorable bias to the world?
Well, I think that's the point of that Section 230. We get rid of Section 230 and now they're liable for anything they do.
Right.
So if they're going to advertise as being something and people sign up to that and they violate that, then they're liable.
Agree.
Great. Perfect. All right, good. Short and sweet. That's always fun. Then I guess we'll take two more here. This one comes from, and Kenneth, I'll ask you to take this one as well, and then I'll take the next one after this. This one comes from this one comes from Efficient Plane. In the event of a Trump loss, what is your take on a potential uprising or mass insurrection as more and more comes to light about Joe and Hunter Biden?
I personally don't see an uprising in this country at all. I see we'll probably have small groups of disgruntled people doing things like they're doing now, burning and pillaging in the centers of cities, in Portland and Chicago and New York, various places like that. But I don't see that as a major uprising. Our country has been going through transitions from one administration to another for 240 some years. So I don't see any change in that.
Mr. Wiebe?
I'm not so sure that's right. if it becomes absolutely clear that a grave error in justice, meaning no justice, is the result of this matter, I'm not so sure that's going to sit well with the general population. I think there will be an uprising, but I don't think it'll be with guns and bullets and that kind of thing. But I do see people not standing for it, whether that's tremendous marches on DC, marches on Congress, marches on the DOJ, phone calls. I don't know all the forms that expression might take, but I don't think people are so tired of no justice, two justice systems, them and us the people and them, different systems. It is such a core of our constitutional republic that all men are created equal and all men are entitled to justice, that I don't think people will just say, ho hum, another election and go to bed. I don't think that'll happen. Nor should it. We should not allow that kind of an assault on the system that governs all of us, or there will be no justice for anyone. Anyone.
Okay, Kenneth, you got that? Great. All right, so to close out, I submitted my own question here, so don't worry about typing this one out. This is one that I think we should end on, and then keep the thread open so that we can get more questions coming in, so that we can, of course, continue on the conversation at a later date. Beyond the election and after November 3rd, regardless of what happens, what should every American take as their responsibility to do? What should be done, regardless of who's in the office? What do they need? What do the American people need to do? Yes,
For
Mr.
me, I'd just say, as far as our having anybody in Washington governing us from a national level, I mean, we need to watch and see what they do, not what they say, because what they say, they promise the world, but never do anything. I mean, they do very little. They did as little as possible. But what we need to do is focus on what they do, not what they say, and fire them if they don't do the right thing. It's very simple. If they're going to violate the Constitution or any of the rights of anybody, including companies and so on, I mean, we should not be exclusive or prejudiced against any group one way or the other, no matter what the group. So we should have an even playing field and a standard set of laws that apply to everybody. And if we don't have people in Washington that don't follow that rule, like Comey and so on, and Clapper and Brennan and so on, then we fire them and get people who will. And make sure that you pay attention to that kind of stuff. It's important that you know this. So as I keep saying, democracy is not a spectator sport. You can't be a spectator in a democracy if you want to keep it. You have to participate. Pay attention, find the truth, search the truth. Don't believe people. First of all, anytime a politician says, this other politician says this or that, I don't believe them. I only believe what I hear from that person's mouth, or from the documentation that you can have that they've done in the past, whether it's laws or letters or a memoranda or affidavits, whatever. But you have to find the ground truth, and that comes from the horse's mouth or from their documentation. So, and you need to be active in finding that, especially if you're coming to election. What do these people really stand for? What have they done? What do they do? What have they documented? All of that. What do they say? Not from someone else. You don't believe what other people say. That's hearsay when it comes to that person. You have to hear them say it. And that then is what you should make a judgment on.
Mr. Wiebe.
Yeah, I underline what Bill just said. We are in a civil war. There's no bullets yet amongst the two parties, between the two parties. We have violence in the streets, but those are other issues. But clearly, we need to find a way to get the truth out. As again, the purpose of this session on Reddit is kind of focused around truth. It's very important that each person find sources that they can be comfortable with. And you really have to do your homework. You can't just pick a name. You have to find out the values behind the people delivering the information service to help guide you to the truth. For example, I think this forum by LaRouche is a great font of truth. If it weren't, I wouldn't be here today. Bill Binney would not be here today. We spend hours with LaRouche specifically because it's honest. It seeks truth for discussion, whatever the outcome. And so please consider contributing to the LaRouche organization. Please follow the LaRouche organization. Please contribute your time, your questions as you have tonight. And I know the LaRouche people, as well as Bill and I, who are kind of LaRouche people now also. We are going to give you the truth as best we know how to. We have no agendas except to save the core of this nation, because we do have the best, most equitable, decent form of government in the history of the globe. And it does take work to keep it together. People can no longer just watch and opine. You're going to have to be willing to pick up and make phone calls. Take part in a demonstration. And I don't mean violent. I'm talking about getting a hold of the right people and voicing your concern about the future of this nation and what you expect them to do. Make it clear, but participate. Vote, but more than that, take part in shaping the process.
Okay, that is a wonderful way to end off our stream. First of all, I'd like to thank our viewers for being on here on the stream. Secondly, I'd like to thank everyone who submitted a question or responded or commented onto the thread. We are going to keep the thread open, continue to populate it with your questions, because we might just come back to it before the election. Don't know. We'll see how the world looks. We don't know how it's going to look tomorrow. We certainly don't know how it's going to look next week. But keep your questions coming. If there's a question we missed, we'll figure out a way to get to it. And of course, I'd like to thank our special guests, Mr. Wiebe and Mr. Binney, for participating on this with us. They did, as always, an eye-opening discussion, and it's always a pleasure to have them. And finally, to my tech crew and team here, my co-moderator and my co-transcriber, the DeGrucci's here, and of course, Madison and Kaine working behind the scenes. With that being said, we will be back. This is not the last you've heard of us. And with that, we are going to end here. So thanks again. Okay, and we